Hello, hello everyone. Welcome back from lunch. My name is Darlene, and I'll be emceeing this session. We hope you're refueled for our next talk from Senior Cyber Engineer at Northrop Grumman, Tanya Christensen. She'll be taking you through the transformation journey her small service team made with Jira Service Desk to help them crush SLAs and ease customer and satisfy customers. While her first and only skydive attempt nearly landed her in an old ruins field in Scotland, you'll learn tips in her session today that will help you and your service team hit your targets. Please join me in welcoming Tanya to the stage.
Hi. That was a good one. Am I good?
Yes.
I gave her several tidbits about me, and I told her not to tell me which one she picked. So great. I was probably a little more nervous then when I was careening into that ruins in the middle of Scotland. So hopefully I won't sprain my knee while I'm up here, which is what I did when I landed near those ruins. Oh, clicker, need that. Hi, everybody. If you're curious about Jira Service Desk queues and how we made ours over in our team, you're in the right place. I'm going to review the steps that we took to convert a very chaotic situation with lots of issue backlog and make it much more easier for our team to handle issues and to meet our SLAs. And hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A afterwards when I'm finished. What do weeds have to do with Jira Service Desk? So I'm not sure how many of you actually use a service desk or are support team members of a service desk, but you sometimes will feel like you're in the weeds. There's good news. I've been in the weeds, and I can help you weed your garden, get out of the weeds. I'm no stranger to gardening. I grew up on a farm, and when we were younger, my mom would assign 2 rows of the garden, not the size of the whole room, but the half a room here. So a row would probably be about this long. So 2 rows in the garden to weed before we got to go swimming or hang out with our friends. So I'm good at weeding. So I can help you figure out how to weed your service desk garden. Let me tell you about our garden, if you will, and our team. We are a DoD instance data center, and we service customers who ask for various Atlassian services, as well as a couple other vendor products, Jira, Bitbucket, SonarQube. And in May of 2017, when I joined the team, there were 3.5 service desk agents. Now, of course, we didn't have half a person. That's not logical. But that other half of that person's time was spent keeping our systems running. And at the time, they were very unstable because of our scale. So you had 3 people handling all the tickets that came in. When I started, there were 600 tickets in the backlog. Just a little bit more on the numbers. Those are the numbers of Jira projects and issues that were in the Jira server instance. What we needed to do was figure out how to get from that very weedy garden of 600 issues in the backlog and organize that. So we have to recognize this chaos and how to figure out where to trim and how to trim, right? You don't go into a garden and just start whacking off the weeds at the top. They're just going to grow back, right? You got to pull them out the roots. We set the stage for our customers and ourselves. And I'm going to show you how we put our features to work, how we work our queue, and then what it looks like to live in order when I'm finished. So let's recognize the chaos. That's the failure to prioritize and organize. When you come in, you don't know where to start. You're very confused. You're in the weeds. We had too much email. I came in, so I started on the project, and every morning I would come in. My mailbox was full of tickets. Like, what? Full of email notifications regarding the tickets. The mail that was important was masked by the other ticket volume mail. We had an inefficient team of the 3.5 people working the issues. One was working out of the email. One was working out of their own kind of Jira dashboard. Another one was working on his own private Kanban board. So there was just no rhyme or reason as to when issues were worked, and no motivation to work them in order, if you will. We had no SLA. So our customers had no expectation of when their requests would be resolved. I used to be a customer before I joined the team. I could put in a request for a new Jira project. It might take a day. 2 weeks later, I put in a request for a Jira project. Simple request, doesn't take much to create one. 3 or 4 weeks or months later, there was no rhyme or reason as to how I, as a customer, was being served. The team had no idea on how to properly organize or serve the customers. And we had no reports, so management had no idea. Was that 600 issues the same 600 issues again and again and again? Or was it 600 new issues followed by 600 new issues again? They had no idea. They had no idea of the volume coming in or how quickly we resolved the issues or how long it took us to resolve them. So we had to make order. Because we adore chaos, we love to make order. This is a quote from MC Escher. This is what I wanted my garden to look like, not the weeds. So how did I start to get that garden in order? We set the stage by figuring out who was involved in the issues and how would they act. Who are the members of the team and who are we serving? So we established a service level agreement, right? That's the first thing. Let's get something in writing. Let's publish it. We started out with 40 hours or 5 days to respond to a customer, and then 40 days to resolve their issue. Excuse me, that was how it was. 40 hours to resolve the issues. So it could, in theory, take 2 weeks for you to get your request resolved. But that we had to start somewhere. We had to draw a line in the sand so we could look at how our measurements were after we kind of worked through that SLA. We published that. We also implemented a stale age off process. So if you submitted a request and it wasn't, we had a question to you as a customer, you know, hey, I want a Jira Service Desk. Okay, great. The name is already in use. What name would you like? Ask that question off to the customer. If they didn't reply back in a number of days, we decided it would be 5. We would close out the issue. Politely, of course, and with a mechanism to reopen, you know, maybe they were on vacation, right? We defined the services. So as I mentioned before, we created Confluence spaces, we created Jira projects, we created Bitbucket projects, et cetera. So we had to categorize these and define the services and the level of service, or tier, as we're going to call it, that would complete that service. And then we published those definitions of the services along with our SLA on how long it would take to complete those services. So those services were broken up into tiers. Tier 1 would be routine and quick turnaround requirements. So if you are a customer, right, imagine you just started using some of our products and you wanted to have a Jira, a group in Crowd to then utilize that group in Confluence as well as in Jira. It's really important to get that group, start populating your members, and utilize that group in your maybe existing project in your existing Confluence space. So we made that a tier 1, quick turnaround. Originally, again, that was 5 days to do that. We're now down to 8 hours to complete that. Tier 2, an intermediate skill to complete the request, and a different category of like workflows that are simple, et cetera. Tier 3 would be something that like maybe some advice on how to set up an Agile board, right? A lot of customers are very new to Jira, especially Jira software, so they don't know how to build a board, so they might need some consultation. So that we classified as tier 3. And we had no advertised goal of completion because we had no idea to know, because each of those cases was very unique, right? So we didn't promise any time for that. Same with Tier 4. This is long-term goals or maybe task required to an upgrade, or that we would need an upgrade to complete before we finish the customer's request. Then we worked with our service agents, all 3.5 of us, and we educated ourselves about those responsibilities and who was going to work each of the tiers. So we had a defined set, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and knew the responsibilities of how quickly we were to respond to those issues. So now we had a team that knew where to go to find their issues because we built queues in our service desk agent view, and that's where they worked. No more working out of email, no more working out of personal dashboard, no more working out of Agile board. The whole team works out of the Jira service desk agent view. We also clarified an escalation policy, so if there was a Tier 1 request that came in and got a little complicated, how do you elevate that to the next tier? The next thing we did was we put the features that Jira has, that Jira Service Desk has, to work for us. Let's go back to the garden. If you're a gardener, or you have a large garden, or even a small garden, you water that garden. You take care of the garden. If you have a large garden, you don't go fill the water pail, go out to your large garden, water the plants, go back to the thing, right? You get an irrigation system. Either a hose with a little thing that does this, or the big one, or if it's a big garden, big irrigation. So use the right tool for the job. For that, were various parts of how Jira is configured. The first thing we did was modify our notification scheme. I don't want email to trigger me to work. So we turned off all the notifications for issue creation to the team. The team didn't need an email every time an issue was created. If you were working out of the email, maybe both of you were taking the same thing and you were working at that's not organized. I also personally turned off notifications for when I make a comment. I know I made the comment. I don't need an email to tell me I made the comment, right? Clean up that email. We also help the customers by improving our service desk portal. This is an actual image of our portal and how it looks today. We put the thing in red, the hint. You would be surprised how many people have no idea they can actually type, they can actually type in that little box that says, what do you need help with? Seriously, they don't know they can type there. We have it integrated with our Confluence knowledge base, so you type there and you can actually get the right form presented to you, or maybe a service desk article. The best thing to do is avoid a ticket in the first place, right? Give them some self-help, and they're like, oh, this is how I modify my group, right? So we put that together. We published our SLA on the front of the portal so they could look for it, and they, how to find our blog, how to find a lot of stuff. So it helped customers find us, right, and information, not just a simple thing that said, help me, right? The next big thing we did was to organize our workflow. This is our actual workflow. It looks complicated, but it's not. It affords lots of different states where we can modify our queues and organize our information. Got to get that garden organized, right? The big thing was the waiting for response. So remember I said if I had to ask a clarifying question and then I needed the customer to respond, I made a state for that. So the issue wouldn't sit in waiting for response after they responded, right? Because then we'd have to go read all of those and go, did they respond? Did they respond? I don't know. Did they? I don't know, right? So we had another state for that. We created a couple other states, on hold and needs follow-up. These are just other ways for us to organize our information. Needs follow-up is where we put the things that we're escalating. I'm going to need to follow up on that. It might mean that I got to go Google something to figure out how to help them, or it could be for on hold. Maybe we need to wait for an upgrade before we can resolve that request. So we put that on hold. These states are important with our SLA. You'll see that in a bit. Another one we added was needs approval. Sometimes what we've done is we don't just create custom fields because you asked for it. We now have an approval process. Because we had 700, probably doesn't sound like a lot to you, but with an instance with as many issues as we had, 700 fields is a lot, so we decided we would go through an approval process, so that's where we implemented that. Oops, so sorry, wrong button. Hopefully no one got blinded by that. And then lastly, we added a reopen. Many of the service desks that I have looked at in the past have an automatic reopen when someone makes a comment. I don't want my ticket to be opened again when someone says thank you, right? So we made a purposeful state where the customer can request the reopen. It's set in that reopen state. We then evaluate that to decide whether it should be reopened or not. We utilized the service desk automation. A lot of people don't know that the automations are there for service desk when you're building a service desk to automate things. So this automation that we put in place actually automates the state change that I discussed earlier, where I ask the customer a question and they respond. You can configure Jira Service Desk automation to when the customer versus the agent makes a comment, automatically changes that state to the, using the transition, in our case, respond, to put it over in that state. We also needed to define our SLA inside of Jira Service Desk using the SLA configuration interface. This is our actual SLA image. Notice, so this is response. So again, we originally had that response time to be 5 days. We're down to 2 days. Give us some time to respond to the issues. But we've added the pause points. And key here is the filter for which, and I'm not sure everyone can see it, but the filter is important to the math involved in calculating the SLA. Because when we implemented the new SLA requirement for, in this case, we're now actually down to 2 days, it was 5, we wanted to only count from that day where we decided that that would be 2 days forward. So Jira is no longer doing math on any issues older than that, and we don't care about that set of issues for calculating our SLA. So in our case, we have 39,000 issues in our project. We eliminated, 20,000 of those out of that math. Same with the resolution SLA, added those pause points that I mentioned earlier, where you are on hold. The clock doesn't count against us when we're waiting on the customer, right? The ball is in their court, not ours. So that SLA clock is stopped so that we can not have poor SLA calculations. And again, this is where we defined our tiers and the filters used for those tiers. Now you'll see on here that we still have tier 3 and 4. Even though we don't calculate or have a promise to those customers at that tier 3 and 4 level, we put a WAG in there for us to see how we're doing. If we had 120 days or hours, how many is that? I think that's a month. Not good at math. What would that number be? Another thing we did was to use the new, I guess it's not new anymore, canned responses. We built a library of these canned responses to help us quickly answer or provide information to the user. Every time a project is created, the same information is provided to the customer. They get, here's a link to your project, right, the summary link, and here's a document in Confluence that says, I've got a project, now what, right? So most people who are in our environment, they're told, oh, I've got to go use Jira, right? So we at least provide them some documentation on how to use it. I've got this project, what I do with it. So that's a canned response. We also have a canned response for that when we close out the issues that have aged off, and with the information used to reopen the issue. Hi, your issue's been closed. We haven't heard from you in 7 days or 5 days. If this was an error, please issue a reopen request from the portal. Same exact canned response. Helps us quickly get through issues. So now we've taken all the features and the tools and we've got that hard work going for us. What do we do now? Gotta find that right button. We work the queue. So my garden's looking a little better, less weeds. Well, every once in a while I can go out and maybe there's a tomato, right? When we do that, we know what should we do and where do we go to find our issues. In our case, we built tiered queues. So we actually used the tier number, 1, 2, and 3 on those. On one side of our issue processing is what we call triage. Now, if anyone is familiar with the TV show MASH, I know it's an older show, but when I grew up, I watched MASH. The helicopters would land, hot guy get out there, and he was like, oh, this guy's leg is not there. You're number 1, right? Oh, you've got a broken arm. You're second, right? So that's what we do with our queue. It's a lot less bloody, but we still have to organize the information, right? So we have a submitted, responses received, the request to reopen, and we have what we call as a ticket manager. It happens to be myself, my coworker. We started out with one person, and we've enhanced the team. But having that one set of eyes also helps you because you can find trending. If I get an issue and I triage in the queue and something's submitted and someone says, Bamboo's not processing, I'm running out of agents. And then like 20 minutes later, I get another one that says, Bamboo's not processing, I'm running out of agents, or something like that. And then I get a third one. I'm like, I turn to our SEs. Hey guys, I think there's something wrong with Bamboo. We're getting a lot of tickets from customers saying Bamboo's not acting right. If you didn't have a single set of eyes doing that, you might miss that trending, right? You might just queue that to tier 3 and go, well, I'm on, right? And the next guy comes on 2 hours later. He had no idea that there was a ticket queued, that Bamboo was having issues, and queues it for work, right? So you want to have that kind of single set of eyes, primary person managing the queue. And also, that's the triage where we make sure the right tier level is on there, ask those clarifying questions from customers, and just make sure it's queued for the right, it's queued for work in the right tier. Then you work the issues. So this is, let me put on my tier 3 hat. I go into my tier 3 queue, and I see what issues are there. I work them first in, first out, right? That means I'm working the oldest issues first, helping the customer with their issues. And again, this is where we use our escalation policy. If a tier 2 person has what started out to be a simple workflow change, and then the customer said, oh, can you add this? And can you add this post function? And hey, can you do this condition? That gets a little more complicated. So the tier 2 person can then change we actually use the labels field for our tiers. They can change the label to tier 3, clear the assignee. It pops into the tier 3 queue based on the filters that are used to define these queues. So we've established that policy. Then it shows up in the tier 3 queue as possibly older than some of the issues that were in there before. So this has helped us to build our organized queue handling system. So now, yay, we're living in order. I don't have to dig through the weeds to get my tomatoes or corn or carrots or whatever. Tomato sandwiches in Maryland, by the way, awesome, from Maryland. So we're living in order, right? Our chaos is over. We have fewer emails, right? Now we're getting the emails that matter. If I'm working a customer's issue, I get their emails because they might have responded, and I can get the answer or the response or the comment, and I don't have to weed through the other emails that are just pummeling me, right? Also, there could be other emails that are related to our office that we need to respond to, and it's not clogged with Jira notices. Our team is much more efficient. They know where to go to find the work. They know how quickly they should respond. They know, they actually We have our tier 1 guy. He is like, oh, the SLAs, it's close to the timeout. I got to work on this, right? So there's this urgency, this need to make sure that the issues are resolved in that timely manner so that we get that good SLA score, which we are exceeding. Now that we're calculating those SLAs, it's been a year and a half or so. We're exceeding our SLAs. Management is very happy with this. Getting those detailed reports, now that we have SLAs, we have SLA reports, we have ticket queue counts. Management was able to see that there was way more work than people to do the work, and they hired more people. We had evidence to prove that we needed more people on staff. That half a guy, where are you, James? He became whole guy. And have now 5 more people helping him keep those systems running. This helped us in 2018. We resolved, in just 2018, 10,000 issues. Now, to us, that's a big deal because that's about how many were submitted and pretty much how many got resolved, right? There wasn't this large backup. So what do the numbers look like now? We're still supporting the same services. We switched from Mailman to Simpa. That's just a different icon that's on there. But we're growing. We're beyond scale in some cases. More projects, 1.5 million issues in our data center instance alone. That's just the data center instance. We have many more instances now, a few server instances. One has 45,000, another one has 50,000, et cetera. So those servers, and inside of our one service desk, or our one data center instance, we have 1,700 projects, and then if you add up all the others, it's about 2,600. Confluence spaces, off the charts. We really need a way to clean those up. And instead of 9 instances, we now have 25. We took on some other work and have different enclaves where the Jira services are set up in a couple different confluences. And our running ticket queue, though, even with all of this growth, is still in the 125 range. We get really excited when we get down under 100. You know, we're like, oh, we're 99. Somebody quick, close the ticket so we get under that 100. And so I think the lowest point we were down to was probably 80 something, which is just like, I don't know, it's a thing. I like to cross things off a list, and like crossing tickets off just makes things feel good. But that's my problem. And now we have 5 service desk agents, and then another 5 or 6 engineers to keep the systems running. So that's growth in the team that can respond to the issues. Instead of one person triaging all the tickets, we have a backup person, right? I can take a vacation to Vegas. So we have happy customers, and we have a happy team. And I think yesterday, if you saw the keynote, happiness breeds happiness, and it helps the team, it helps the customers. We had a transition period that we weren't doing really well. Now the customers give us great quotes, satisfaction, turn that on. They say things that it was fulfilled within 1 business day, right? Which, by the way, was not heard of a year and a half ago in our system. It could just be, I don't know when that's going to be done. Yes, random service desk customer has no name. We were responsive, resolved the issue, and kept in good communication. It's always great to hear that we were good at communicating with you. Even if it was just via the issue itself, if you have good communication back and forth, that's important. Because as a customer, you want to know you're being heard. You don't want to just get canned responses. You want specific responses to you. I could show you 80 more slides like this, but I won't. So how can you do the same thing that we did? How can you make over your queue? Well, you can take some of the advice, some tips. I originally called this briefing, or this session, I wanted to call it Q-tips, right? Most of you know what Q-tips are. Not everyone internationally knows what those are, but I was going to chuck some Q-tips out here, but it didn't work. So what can you do? You can run an Atlassian play. You heard about these this morning. There's more being added. But we ran the health monitor. We have a Premier Support contract, and our TAM, Technical Account Manager, came in a quarterly basis. And when this health monitor was run, I think early 2017, we were sick. They kind of did, sick, better, healthy. We were sick across the board. But the health monitor and the questions asked in that health monitor helped us to identify the areas where we can improve. We evaluated our SLA. We do this weekly. We meet every month to decide whether we need to change it. And we deep dive sometimes into some of those outlying issues on our SLA. So these are our actual SLA reports. So what do we have in the end? Yay, organized, beautiful garden. I guess the red one is tier 4, I don't know. I like the feeling of organization, and the team does too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tanya.
Does anyone have any questions? Darlene will walk around.
I'll make my way over.
This is my first summit, by the way. I'm having a great time.
Hey, so I just had a question about specifically customer service desk surveys.
Yeah.
So all that feedback you got that you have all the examples of, did you find an effective way to deploy a survey using Jira Customer Service Desk, or did you use an external thing like SurveyMonkey, something like that to get to your users?
So on our team, we didn't. We may explore something like that. We have something internal in our network that we could utilize if we wanted more in-depth survey questions. But right now, we're just using the out-of-the-box Jira Service Desk. How was your experience, or whatever the question is that we put there. Then we use that. We actually gather SLA report monthly. We used to just give that to management so they could see how we're doing. Yeah, you're doing great. Good award fee. Yay. Now we publish those to the customers. So we have a Confluence space that has internal access and external. And we publish those to the customers in an effort of transparency. When we do get feedback that is less than 3 or 4 stars, I will include that in the report. And if we haven't already reached out to the customer, we'll reach out to the customer, get some clarifying information, ask how we can improve the next time. But we put that correspondence in the actual published report so that anybody who wants to look at our metrics can and see what we do when we do have a negative response.
You mentioned canned responses. So I know that Jira Service Desk doesn't support canned responses, so I'm curious how you're doing it. Really?
Yeah.
Is that new?
So I don't know where James is, but
okay.
was 7.9.
Oh.
It's amazing. We had, prior to the actual implementation of that feature, we had a Confluence page where we had the canned responses there, and we would just copy and paste. Now that we have them embedded, it's much faster to use those.
Okay, great. And one more question.
Sure.
Why do you use labels for the tiers based on using like a drop-down or something like that?
When I'm, labels are freeform. And what we do when we're triaging, I can hit the L button and I can add the tier label or change it and maybe add some other labels that help us with the other clarifying information. I didn't mention it, but in our actual forms that face the customer, we know that creating a Jira project is a tier 1 task, so we hide that field and have that pre-filled out. It's pre-labeled that way. So when you triage, most of the information is there. We just have to double check, did they use the wrong form, or for different requests, we need to change the label so that it goes in the right queue. We just like labels because it's more free form and you can actively, quickly change that and add others.
With the hotkey, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Anyone
I have some
else?
other questions, but I'll leave it.
Sure, you can ask all when we're done. Sure.
Does anyone else have questions? We have about 5 minutes, so hopefully we'll be able to come back.
6 minutes and 53 seconds.
6 minutes and 53 seconds. There you go.
Hey, so you said management didn't really know about how many tickets were coming in. How did you have a conversation with them? Because I'm sure you understood that things were chaotic mess. What did that conversation look like? And was it kind of like, I need to spend time organizing, so yeah, we're not going to be working on things as much for the meantime, but things will get better. Like, how does that conversation look like?
So they were very active along with us. Our management went with us to our TAM meetings. I mean, they were the government actually paying for the TAM sessions. And we as a team had those discussions. It was not just me, right? I was new to the team when they had already run one health monitor and before I had joined the team. But it was a collaborative effort. They knew based on the number of issues coming in, it just was, we weren't able to concisely report to them what really was going on. It was pretty much every month we did a monthly status report. The number would be like 555, 650, right? That it doesn't tell you much, that total number. So once we worked towards the changes we did have to kind of, I remember coming in on a weekend and doing all the tier stuff and making those tier filters. And then of course, I don't know, does anybody know how the labels work? So labels in tier 1, and then I wanted to make sure the unassigned went in a queue. Well, I forgot you have to do and labels are empty, right? So that took some enhancement, but once we noodled that, we were able to then actually apply the SLA and start the reports, but they were collaborating with us. And they supported us, which was most important, because without that support, we wouldn't have had the time. I don't think she saw your.
Do you utilize Salesforce or a CRM, and does it go back and forth? Is anybody in the room?
Sorry. Darlene, there was a question up here.
Do you use Kanban boards?
No, so as I mentioned earlier that, we had one team using a Kanban board for the service queue, but you were not able to get as granular there as you need to, well, at least for the volume and the scale that we had, because that was then based on the states, and just the service desk view, the agent view itself, it just lends itself towards the right information. When you show those columns on the screen, you can see the SLA age, you can see the reporter, and the label and some other clarifying information there, and it just makes finding the work better than in a Kanban board, because sometimes you can't see all the issues on the board, right? The cards are big, and it just makes it a little easier to see it in the service desk.
Okay.
Did you have any issues with my particular management, they want a lot of hands-on desk side support. Did you have any issues with that with your company?
Not really. We are a very distributed, we have a very distributed set of 150,000 users. They could be across the world, so I'm not going to fly to, Iraq to help this guy with his ticket. But we may, with those customers that are in a different time zone than us, if we have a lot of go back and we're trying to help them hone their problem or give them a little more guidance, we will adjust our schedule to be on site at our location in their time zone, if it's not too radical. That way we can get on the phone with them and kind of talk it through. So we do get phone calls. It's great. Sometimes we get phone calls when we don't want them. As soon as I've triaged something, hey, you just touched my ticket. I'm like, yep, who are you? I just touched 47 tickets. Sure, yeah. Anyone else?
So we have time for one last question.
Thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
Could you speak a little bit to how you came to one unified workflow for everything and not, for example, a different workflow for different tiers, or how you came to a tier in a field versus any other way?
We wanted to have a workflow that suited all of the different states that a typical service desk would encounter. As a matter of fact, when we build a Jira service desk, how am I on? We actually use that workflow as a default. So we created, one Jira project that we use as the starter for a service desk. We did one for software and one for business as well. But it seemed, we enhanced that. It took a year or two to kind of figure out that flow. But all the help and all the requests, they fall right into those states. So we didn't have to move issues from one workflow to the other. And so it just made it a little easier. And then our SLA calculation, one flow, we were, calming around. Cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tanya. And